Welcome to Relatively Weird, the podcast where a couple of cousins get together and talk about everything weird. I'm Kim.
I'm Jilli.
And we're going to get into it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm nervous.
I'm nervous because you're going to be, maybe you're going to, you know what? I'm not even, anyway. Today we're going to talk about extraterrestrials.
Just in general, huh?
No.
Okay.
Because that would
be
a very big
days.
Yes. I will get into some stuff that is like, I don't know, like definitions and whatever. But today we're going to be talking about two women on opposite sides of the country who supposedly have had similar encounters.
Okay.
I see your face. You're like, okay.
So when I think of abductions, I think of the SNL skit with Kate McKinnon.
I have been watching that. Like all of them, especially the
so
ones with Ryan Reynolds. Yeah. Not Ryan Reynolds.
Gosling.
Ryan Gosling. I'm sorry. Okay. I don't want to make this whole thing like just me giggling into the mic. So
it's so good though.
It is so good. I almost shared it so many times because I'm like, this is hilarious, but she's gonna know like what my topic is. So after every time I would like do my research, I'd have to like watch another one. And I think recently, like her last episode was she was that lady, and then she like leaves with the aliens or something. Like that's her final exit. Oh my god, so funny. Okay, so do you know about like Roswell, or you've heard of Roswell?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just gonna start with Roswell to kind of put some like historical. I say that loosely because we don't necessarily know if it's historical or not,
right.
But it is understood to be an incident among people who think about extraterrestrials in the United States, at least.
Okay. I mean, like, something happened.
Yeah. So after the well-known Roswell flying saucer crash of 1947, the U.S. government made first contact with extraterrestrials, or ETs. Stuff that I say is, I'm going to say that it's fact, or I'm going to present it like it's fact, but understand that these are things that people have said. We don't know for sure if they are true.
Okay.
But it would take too long for me to be like, and supposedly, allegedly.
Allegedly.
Da, da, da. All right. So in 1952, an entity named EBE2 agreed to cooperate with the U.S. government, speaking mainly through telepathy. So they would use, and the government. So your face. Eric was so much nicer to me because when I was doing this research, I was like, no, but you don't understand. It makes so much sense. And he's just like trying to go to the grocery store, like backing out of the room, like, yeah, sure, whatever.
Okay, can I ask a question though before we go too much further? When you say these things, quote unquote, happened, where is the information coming from?
A lot of different places. Like,
okay, but like obviously legitimately.
Some of it comes from like people of military branches,
okay.
Supposedly people who have worked at like Area 51 previously that couldn't speak out before. There are more well-known people who do a lot of talks like with MUFON and stuff. I'll get into what MUFON is. But I don't know if you've ever, you probably haven't, but if you've ever taken the time to like see any kind of documentary with extraterrestrials or stuff, like there are people that are working
right
with these groups.
Ufologists.
Yeah, but okay. But ufologists seems like, I mean, I guess you could be anybody, I suppose. Because, like I said, some people work for the military, and more specifically, like, not the Navy. It's
the Air one?
Yes, the Air Force. The Sky one. Yeah, and I'm sure you've heard these people's names. A lot of it makes you you can be skeptical, but also you also have to be like, why are these people even talking about this when they've been in serious vocation, like serious.
Yeah.
I mean, it would kind of discredit you in a lot of ways, but
no, and that's fair, and that's kind of why I wanted to ask the question, because listen, we'll get into my feelings about this.
No, that's why I was so scared.
But it's not bad. It's not that I'm like they don't exist. I think that would be arrogant, to believe that. But there's just so much stigma around people. So basically, all of that just to say that I was just curious, like, who's saying this? But that's all.
And if we were to get into that conversation, it would take a long time because there are some people who make stuff up, and then there's other people who have been legitimately working in higher jobs who talk about this stuff. So in 1953, President Eisenhower was brought in to take part in the negotiations between the U.S. government, the U.S. military, and these extraterrestrials. Now, when I say extraterrestrials, we're more talking about the stereotypical aliens that you think. The Greys is what they call them. So the Greys are like 4 feet tall or less, usually. They look kind of like kids from far away. They have like grayish, bluish skin, big eyes. The thing you would think of if you were thinking of aliens.
I'm glad to hear they're short, though.
Well, we'll get into some other ones, but...
Yeah, I mean, the movies portray them as very tall and imposing, and I don't like that.
Yeah. So, the U.S. government wanted technological hardware, including weapons, propulsion technology, and metallurgy, so metals basically that we haven't seen before. And the ETs would agree in exchange for human genetic material.
Seems risky.
Yeah.
But okay.
So I mostly used one book, because this is based on basically a book, about these two women, but I wanted to gather more information about like the why. They're going to talk about the how, but why?
Right.
So we'll now talk about MUFON, which stands for Mutual UFO Network. Although I don't think they call them UFOs anymore. I think there's some UAPs, but that was the original. It was founded in 1969. It's still going on, or still running today. It's a non-profit organization consisting of civilian volunteers who study reported UFO sightings. So I think you probably pay like I don't know this for sure, but you probably pay like a membership fee or something, and you're a part of it. And I guess, they have like conferences and stuff like that, but you don't necessarily have to be like a scientist.
No, right. It's like Neighborhood Watch for the galaxy.
Yeah. Exactly. So 2 women wrote this book. The first one I'm going to talk about is Kathleen Marden. Kathleen Marden is a UFO abduction researcher and former sociologist. She was niece to Barney and Betty Hill. Do you remember the Barney and Betty Hill story?
No.
So Barney and Betty Hill, it was basically just a well-known alien abduction story, which they remembered their abduction through regressive hypnotherapy. So I think it kind of started more abductees to come forward and do that sort of thing. She's director of field investigations for MUFON for 10 years. And she's also trained in regressive hypnotherapy. So the book that they wrote is The Alien Abduction Files, the most startling case of human alien contact.
Okay.
All right.
Startling.
Just keep an open mind.
I am very open. Okay. I'm very open.
So who is Denise Stoner? We're going to talk about her first. She is one of the women that was an abductee for most of her life. She's a former psychologist. She was formerly the director of the Florida Research Group. Okay, this is long. The Florida Research Group affiliation of the UFO Research Center of Pennsylvania.
Yowza.
And she's also the a MUFON National Abduction Research Team member. And then formerly the Florida MUFON State Section Director and the Chief Investigator. And I say all that to say, like, what the heck does this lady have to do with any of this? She was not part of MUFON when it started, because it started when she was younger. And her experiences had pushed her to that.
Right.
But she didn't start coming out with her story until after she was retired. So, yeah, I mean, think about it. You go to work and you're like, by the way.
Well, and what did you say? She was a psychologist?
Yes.
Psychiatrist?
Yep.
Right. You don't want to be like, hey, I was abducted. And
yeah.
You're not treating people.
And that's why I kind of think that these stories are interesting, because when we talk about the other woman as well, you'll learn that her identity is secret. Like they just made up a name for her because she's still going through regressive therapy, and she doesn't want people to know who she is or who her family is. But we'll get to her. So Denise Stoner, August 13th, 1982, in Alberta, Colorado. She and her husband Ed were taking a weekend trip to their secondary mobile home in Grace Acqui Ranch near Buena Vista. Okay. I'm so rusty.
There's so many long, involved names in this story.
I know. I think it was important to get as much detail as possible, because I could just sit here and tell you.
Yeah. Yes.
She was abducted so many times. So Denise's parents had already gone up to the secondary mobile home, ready to start, kind of ready the vacation home, and they were with some family friends. Denise and Ed, their trip would usually take about 137 miles from their house, which would be around an hour and a half trip.
Yeah.
So at 6:55 p.m., around the 74-mile mark, because Ed used to, do the odometer. He would, see.
Yeah, yep.
Denise and Ed would see yellow lights in the distance. It was still light around this time, and their vision was clear. So it was kind of described like a deserty area, pretty open. I'm thinking maybe dirt road. Maybe not dirt road, but isolated road.
Yeah.
The couple felt their vehicle move sideways off the road. And then the next moment they remember, they were in the car. It was nighttime. The odometer still read 74 miles, but they were 40 miles ahead in their journey. And the clock read 11 p.m.
Wow.
So when they arrived at their vacation home, Denise's parents were like, what the hell? Where have you been? They were 3 or 4 hours late from when they said they were going to be there. And they had no answers for them. They were like, So they kind of everyone sort of uncomfortably played it off. Her mom was like, no, really, where have you been? She's like, I don't know. We're here now. There's no cell phones around this time. So,
no, right.
So later on, so we're going to fast forward to 2009 now.
Okay.
So I believe around this time, Denise is retired. She meets Kathleen Marden through their connections through MUFON. And she wanted to work with another regressive hypnotherapist to learn about her abductions, which is so... I feel like if that's what's happened, that's really brave. To just kind of be like...
Yeah.
If you bury it, maybe... I don't know.
Well, right, because you have to think your brain generally blocks memories because it's doing you a favor. Yeah. So can I ask, though, did she know... We mentioned the one in 1982. Mm-hmm. But she was already married at that point. So did she know at that point that she had been experienced things previously, or she found that out after the regressive therapy?
I think she found out after.
Okay. All right.
I think the more time... So I'm going to go through... That's just the incident that they start with. Mm. But as she works more with Kathleen, she'll she'll kind of go back. There's going to be quite a few incidences that we'll talk about, which is why I said this one's going to be a little bit long. Sorry. She met Kathleen in 2009. In 2011, this is when she starts to go through the regressive hypnosis.
Okay.
So Kathleen takes Denise back to that day, 1982. After seeing the yellow lights, Denise recalls that she sees a craft hovering nearby about like 100 feet from them. She is directed to the opening in the craft, which is shaped like an hourglass. And it has a film of jelly-like substance covering the opening. Kim's face.
Disgusting.
We have to record. Like, we've got to do video at some point. People need to see you.
Oh, God.
So while attempting to move through the opening, Denise felt her body become stuck and quote-unquote shatter. And she doesn't hear a voice, but she understands a message to say, "You're all right, we're going in now." So within the craft, she feels whole again. Now, the way this is set up in the book is that it's more of a transcription from her. You know, Denise says something, then so it's not just her It's not just her going, "So I went through and out." You know, it's like
Yeah.
Kathleen will be like, she will try to ask questions in a non-leading way.
Okay.
And she does say, like, you know, you have to kind of know the people that you are interviewing. Do they seem like they want to be famous? Do they seem like they're a little bit out there? Her conclusion is no. Denise, she had like a whole professional job before this.
Right.
So inside there's a dim light and the hallways are lined with gray extraterrestrials. And she gets the impression that they're like soldiers and they're just kind of lined up on each side of the wall. So like I said, the Greys have large black eyes, no clothing, gray, blue skin, and they're under 5 feet tall. She is approached by a taller being, taller than Denise. So Denise, I think they said, was like 5'4" or something.
Okay.
Average height for a lady. With eyes that were more vertical and no nose and a tiny red mouth. So this one is not...
So sorry.
No, it's... I'm saying,
He didn't have any lip filler. That was not a thing back then.
He had 3 long fingers and a thumb. So she kind of was like a pincher. Pincer? Pincher?
It's like pinchy claws.
Yeah.
On each hand.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. He was wearing a dark coat.
Oh my God.
And he stands 7 or 8 feet tall.
Oh, Jesus.
Kathleen and Denise agree after her hypnosis that this is more like an insectoid being, almost like a praying mantis.
Ugh, okay.
And I did look up pictures and I'm like, wow, like that's, I don't know, pretty terrifying. She was saying like the Greys didn't freak her out. This one did. Denise is put on a table and this, I'm going to call him the examiner.
Okay.
He examines her. He puts a wire in her foot and then into her vein. He tells her he's going to leave it in for a bit so the ones on Earth can recognize her easily. He then puts a piece of what looks like sand, like a grain of sand, into her eye, like her tear duct. And he explains that it will fall out in a few days.
Does he explain what it's for?
No.
What the?
Next, he pushes a pink diamond-shaped device on her abdomen, and he pushes her ovaries aside. Oh, there's going to be a lot of that, so get ready.
Just get out of here for a second, ovaries.
They place a needle close to Denise's navel, and they explain that this is for her to carry, but not to incubate for long. It burns Denise, and a taller Grey touches her temple and relieves the pain. Which I'm like, can we get that?
I know, convenient.
Denise asks why this is happening, and they simply tell her that she is a part of a whole. She has been watched for some time, and when the time is right, the others will come forward. Denise asks.
That was just a more efficient way to say it, that's all.
Denise. She asks what she is carrying, and they reply that there are others that stay. They tell her...
riddles.
They tell her to look for... Well, and also I do think it's just thoughts.
Okay.
Like, so she's trying to make sense of it. Also, this was, back in 1982, so... They tell her to look for the large, rounder eyes. They said they are kinder than us, but you get to keep them. We try to breed more loving than us, and we need that. Denise asks if they were moving, like when inside the craft. Are we moving? The entities say no, otherwise she would get sick. The craft is biologically powered. It can pass through time and space, and that this is a new technology for them. The craft itself is like a being, which is probably why the hole or the opening had like a jelly-like substance.
A little mucus memory.
Yeah. A 3D screen comes up from the floor showing Earth with no lights, and then showing a faraway planet on the edge of our galaxy. So our galaxy is the Milky Way. And then I think the next closest is like Andromeda, right?
Sure.
Of course, yes.
You know me and my space knowledge.
So next, Denise is ushered out of the craft with the explanation that she doesn't have a lot of time after being exposed to that room. Afterwards, Denise is back on the desert floor watching the craft leave and finds herself back in the car with Ed. So that was the night of 1982.
Okay, so Ed was left alone. Basically, they just kept him there.
So he was hypnotized by Kathleen. He agreed as well. He explains that he felt the car shift too and then was weightless and paralyzed. He found himself in a domed room and he felt a pulsing, humming, and then he was back in the car again. So that's all he remembers. They didn't seem like they were really interested in it. How do you feel so far?
Number one, the aliens need to learn consent.
Yes.
Because what the fuck?
It gets a lot worse, actually.
God damn it.
Probably trigger warning for people.
And the whole thing would make me really, if I were her, am I carrying one of your baby? What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, she didn't remember.
I suppose. And
until
by the
now.
time she finds out, it's probably long gone.
Yeah. They did have one daughter. She had cerebral palsy. And she's not really in the story. It doesn't seem like she was visited. When I get to the other woman, her children are more involved, it seems.
Jesus.
So we're going to go back now to Florida in 1991. Denise and Ed had moved there since their 1982. I don't forget why they moved around so much, but it happens. All right, so she and Ed by then had become scuba diving instructors. That's their hobby. So at this time they were away on a weekend trip for a scuba diving meet. In their hotel, Denise wakes up in the middle of the night and feels a compulsion to leave and drive to a remote location near what looked to be a water tower. The water tower's top was removed and panels opened up, revealing a ramp. So, not a water tower.
Sneaky.
2 gray figures lead Denise inside and greet the Insectoid examiner once again. He's going to be around a lot.
Oh, this guy.
The examiner punches what looks like a staple gun to the side of Denise's head. And then she's led back to her car. She drives back to her hotel room, gets back in bed, and notices a little bit of blood dripping from the puncture wound. The next morning, Ed and Denise head out to their scuba diving meet. and passed by an old-looking barn with diamond-shaped structures on the top and, like, netting around these structures. And Denise asks Ed, what on earth are those? And he responds, chicken coops. Which made me laugh. And Denise disagrees. In the very next moment, they find themselves on the highway only 28 miles away from their house, and 30 minutes have passed. They drive back to the old barn, only to find that the diamond-shaped structures were gone. And under hypnosis, Denise recalls seeing the examiner that day, who was checking on her head. And Ed, under hypnosis, recalls that he found himself in his truck with Denise gone, and then next, a tall gray with no mouth or nose carries Denise back to the passenger seat, sets her down, makes eye contact with Ed, and then closes the passenger door. This is serious, Kimberly.
This is. It sounds really...
How are you feeling so far?
I'm mad at the aliens because, you know, did Denise ever agree to any of this? No. Like, as a child, I'd be like, yeah, I'm cool being an ongoing experiment for you.
No.
Well, like, to what end is...
I can speculate. Like you said, they kind of communicate in riddles. Yeah. I don't want to say speak because they don't speak. It seems like, well, I'll kind of get into a little bit more of their background with the other woman. But yeah, Denise seemed like she had, I mean, I don't know for sure, but it seemed like she had a little bit less of a awful time with them.
Oh, for Christ's sake.
The other woman.
Great.
So.
This examiner just seems like an arrogant jerk.
Well, she said that he was like cold. Like they don't really know how like human emotions work. I think that's part of why they're so curious about humans, is that typically humans also care for one another.
Yeah.
And I think on Earth we're the closest thing. We're the most intelligent. I mean, other animals care for their members. I was going to say people. That's not true either. All right. Well, I'll get into their background.
Like why? Yeah.
Later.
And I'm a little annoyed with him. So there's something about the examiner that, and like the way he communicates, that it's almost like he's giving her just enough to like shut her up.
Yeah.
When you're like, actually, it doesn't make any... That's not an answer at all, but you're just giving me enough.
Okay. So, early encounters in 1951, Denise was 2.5. She remembers her grandfather had stayed behind to watch her while her baby sister was being born in the hospital. She remembers seeing an egg-shaped thing in the sky and wondering why her grandfather put Humpty Dumpty in the sky. When she asked her grandfather about it, he looked out, closed the blinds, and sent her to bed. While in bed, Denise remembers seeing a small creature enter her room through the wall. She said it was wearing a hooded cloak, and it told Denise that they were going for a ride. Denise said that this would happen so much, her family thought that she had like an imaginary friend. And Denise wasn't the only one to be visited by the creatures. Sometimes her little sister, she would see her get like levitated out of her crib and then disappear with them too. One night, Denise found herself alone in the park when she was a little bit older. A creature with a device shaped like an oil can, was headed towards her. He said he could not take her home and dripped a liquid from the device into her ear. And he told her this would help them keep track of her while she grows up. So later that night, Denise found herself back in bed, but her pant legs on the bottom were wet, like she had been out in like grass. These visits would result in Denise having fear of the dark. Oh my gosh, no way. As she grew older, others would start to experience these visitations with her. Denise one day was walking home from a friend's house, and she noticed that, like, all the bugs had stopped, any kind of environment, no wind. Oh, this is so creepy. A tall man was following her. Denise started to run, and she ran to, like, another friend's house on the way home, and the tall man disappeared behind their house. She told her friend's dad to call the police, and they did. The police came and interviewed Denise and the family, and then they went outside to investigate around the house. Denise said she saw the creature, like, peer through the curtains from outside. And she all of a sudden felt a compulsion to open the front door. One of the cops burst. I think they only called one cop, because he burst in and he, like, shut the door, and he said, "My statement to you will be that I have only one flashlight. I will not be going into that backyard by myself. I can't call backup because I don't believe I can explain the reasons why I need it. And I'm leaving now and I won't be back."
Oh, good. We'll just go fuck ourselves then. Goodness gracious.
Yeah. And it does seem like a lot of her encounters will be when she's not alone. That's the scariest. Well, one of the scariest parts is, like, no one can save you.
I do not like that they can compel her to do things.
Yeah. So throughout her life, Denise had difficulty becoming pregnant. She experienced many miscarriages. One night, Denise was taken once again by the Greys to a nearby craft. She stood in a room full of clear cylinders, housing what looked to be human fetuses in different stages of development. She said she got the impression that these fetuses were from her body and were taken from her throughout her life. A female-looking being enters the room with a child who looks very similar. I think she means to the female. Like, they had, like, they looked humanoid, but they were, like, just a little bit different. They conveyed to Denise that in order for either species to survive, changes must be made, and that they were tasked with making them. Their planet would become uninhabitable soon, and they were in search of a different planet to live on. She was then taken home. So on occasion, Denise would see other people during her abductions. One night she found herself in a room with, like, a whole collection of humans. They were huddled and scared while the Greys seemed concerned that a particular project that they were working on wasn't going well. Denise noted a redheaded woman, take another woman's hand and try to escape. And then she said, curiously, a woman matching this description had a similar memory that also worked with Kathleen. And they are going to call her Jenny. So this is the other lady now.
Okay.
Jenny is not her real name. They gave her a pseudonym, Jenny Henderson, so we'll just refer to her as, like, the Henderson family or Jenny, whatever. Jenny had been followed by extraterrestrial beings for most of her life. In reading about Benny and Barney Hill, Jenny began to work with a doctor who worked with them to uncover regressed memories. And I believe this doctor passed. He passed away, so all of that was kind of lost.
Okay.
And it led her to Kathleen Marden. Jenny remembers a night so she's in New Hampshire at this time. Jenny remembers a night in 1988 that her whole family was visited by Greys. The same kind of Greys that Denise had described. I don't believe they only knew each other through Kathleen, so okay. These are completely separate. Although, I mean, it's not that nobody knows about the Greys. We all know about the Greys. But.
Yeah.
At this time, she had thought the visits were done, but this night solidified for her that they were not. Jenny remembers that while she was in bed, she and her husband, Doug, woke up to investigate a noise from downstairs. So as he got up, he became, like, immobile from these creatures that were in their doorway. And he was laid down on the bed. The next morning, Jenny woke up to find red streaks on her pillow. In the mirror, she saw she had, like, bloodshot eyes. And when, like, any kind of liquid would come out, it would feel like it was burning. There were scratches down her back. And throughout the morning, she would encounter weird things like light bulbs would short out. Her son had like a battery operated video game that would like turn on and no one had touched it. While making breakfast, the handheld mixer like died when she held it. Jenny asked her son Aiden, also a pseudonym, how he slept. So I think he was like 12 at this time.
Okay.
He replied that if he didn't believe in UFOs, he does now. And Jenny's like, what do you mean? He said, you know what I mean. And he's like, just let me sleep.
Oh, shit.
So she followed him back to his room, and there were red streaks on his pillow, too. Jenny also had a daughter, Sarah. I think Sarah's like 10 or something around this time, maybe like 9. She asked Sarah how she slept, and Sarah replied that a helicopter outside her window woke her up. She saw the people inside, and then she fell asleep. She dreamed a small man took her outside to play games, and that she felt like she hadn't slept, and there was red streaks on her pillow, too. So while working with Kathleen, they revisited that night, and Jenny remembers being levitated out of her window. And then on the craft, she sees, like, her kids, but she's not allowed to, like, go with them. She's laid on a table, and the thought is conveyed to her that these beings need to take some genetic material from her to help them better understand us. I avoided saying this word, but with a probe. Yeah. They tell her they must stimulate her harmonic vibrational frequency, which is confusing to Jenny and probably everybody else.
Didn't know I had one of those.
So the probe sends pulses like down her body, which feel painful. And then a gray next to her touches her temple and her pain subsides. So very similar, if not the exact same, to Denise.
Yes.
They tell Jenny she doesn't need to be afraid of them, and they are a part of her. Before she was born, they said they put a bit of themselves in her. Turned
Italian there for a second.
She might be. I don't know. We don't know. Yeah. Jenny is unsure if this is a tactic by them to kind of control their subjects, like, you're like us. Jenny sees a vision of a dying planet that was once their home but was destroyed by a predatory invader.
Oh, terrifying.
They, meaning the Greys, destroyed their own planet when they were defending themselves, and the survivors were forced to go underground.
Okay.
Which, that's what we're all afraid of. Like, of, nuclear war could be the same. Jenny sees her kids once again and then is back in bed. Her eyes sting, and there's a triangular mark on her back. Kathleen later discusses the vibrations that Jenny was talking about with a physicist. And the physicist explained that all objects have vibrations. In order for a solid object to pass through another solid object, both have to have the same vibrational frequency. So perhaps in order for Kathleen to enter the craft, her body would need to vibrate with the same frequency as the craft.
Okay.
Unfortunately, Jenny's kids began to sleep with knives and hatchets because of this experience.
Yeah.
Good
for them.
You? But it's so sad because it's like you don't want your kids to be afraid, but there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
So Jenny's first memory of these beings was at age 3. She said she was outside holding hands with her mother, and when she saw these creatures, they had like ghoulish faces, ghoulish masks, she thought they were. It was close to Halloween at this time, so she thought her mom was like preparing her for seeing like scary things, going out trick-or-treating. And she said she felt really proud of herself because she wasn't afraid when she saw them. At age 13, Jenny remembers sometimes waking up, apologies in advance, sometimes waking up with clear fluid coming from her genitals. She said one day she felt too sore to like sit in a chair. She had a dream the night before that her mother saw her on like a surgical table. And then she heard, she's waking up, don't let her open her eyes. Jenny told her mom that morning And her mom confessed that, yeah, like I did see you, but I didn't want you to remember. I didn't want to talk about it. Kathleen wondered if this may be abuse, maybe from like a family member or a friend.
True, yeah.
And Jenny said no. She said she was taken to a doctor to, I mean, you know, you go at that age.
Yeah.
And they said there weren't any like abnormalities that they could tell. Obviously, I'm sure she was like, by the way, I was abducted.
I know.
But that makes me feel sad because, like, I mean, at any age, but like especially when you're going through puberty and stuff, like that's just kind of sad. Her family would often hear her conversing with something in her closet at night, and they wondered if she was just like sleep talking. At age 16, she and her friend were on their way to like a school, I don't know if it was a basketball game or something, early in the evening. Their car engine died on the way there, and Jenny rolled down her window like she was going to scare her friend, like, ooh, like monsters. And then under hypnosis, she remembered that she floated out the car window onto a craft. She said she didn't want to recall what happened while she was aboard, and then afterwards, she and her friend were back in the car and the engine was working again. They made their way to the school gym only to find that the doors were locked and the lights were off. And the time read 11 p.m.
Aww.
So she got home late. She was supposed to pick up her brother, but she didn't end up doing that. And she explained what she thought happened to her parents when she got home. She's like, they're not going to believe this. And they did. And they told her, please don't discuss this with anyone. Which,
what?
Yeah. Do you have thoughts?
I have so much rage
right
now.
Yeah.
Number one, I feel like if you're like Jenny, you're in the car and the engine shuts off and you're like, oh, here we go. They're coming back.
Yep.
And then, like you talked about, so for this stuff to sort of happen around puberty and her mother is there and letting it happen in your mind. I mean, I think at the time, I'm sure you couldn't imagine that she also has no control.
Yeah.
You'd be so angry.
Yeah. She seems, rightly so, like, she does not like them at all. Like, I think Denise is like, well, they seem like they're trying to be not nice, but just not outright hostile either.
Yeah.
I mean, they are taking you away without your consent. But...
Oh, just no concept of somebody being able to say, no, I don't want to be involved in this.
Well, if you think about it, what I said in the beginning, if that really happened, where the U.S. government was like, we will trade you, we'll look the other way if you give us these things. And it's not like everybody has the experience. It's just a select few people out of however many of us there are, 300 million.
You know, people are weird. And I think if they put out a thing that said, listen,
yeah,
you could be part of this, people would sign up for it.
But I don't even know. You'll see that it seems like it's a generational thing with Jenny's family. Like, her mom had experienced it. She experienced it. Now her kids are. There's something about her family that they are interested in, whether it's some sort of genetic code that they want or...
Right. And if they said, like, okay...
or we're just going to pick a family and then,
And we're going to put some of our genetic information into you, then I suppose you would want to follow it sort of all the way through. Then how does it affect your children?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
I mean, if you think about the stuff that we do, like with animals, if you tag like geese and I don't know why they tag geese, but, you just pick a random being and follow it through. I don't know.
We don't think about the goose going, how did I get picked?
Well, if you think, I mean, like, you're like a tiger in the zoo and they have to do like surgery on you. You're in your cage and then you're not. What?
You're right. We're just a giant zoo.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, God.
So Jenny knew that the beings could project their consciousness into balls of light. So this is so that they can observe humans without humans being outright hostile. Because when humans are scared, they can be violent. Jenny and her first husband, Tom, were finding it difficult to conceive a child. Yes, I know I said Tom and not Doug. Doug is her second husband.
Later. Okay.
Jenny was finally able to get pregnant and had been in the early stages of pregnancy when one night Tom was away and Jenny was once again abducted, brought to a room with cylindrical tubes and human fetuses in different stages of development. So it's happened to Denise, it's happening to Jenny. The Greys selected a fetus that was around a month into development. It was conveyed to Jenny that the baby she was carrying would not be viable and that it must be swapped out by the fetus that they chose. So I also think, just pause for a second, I do think that all of these fetuses that she's seeing and that Denise had seen, it seemed like they were from her. What they did to them, I splice their genetic code in there. I don't know. They emerged her in a vat of fluid, and Jenny suspected this was some sort of like nutritional or medicinal thing. And then they placed her back in bed. They told her to drink from the stream, which Jenny took to mean like drink plenty of water, basically. She had been gone for 2.5 hours at that point, and she made it back into her bed, and then 8 months later, she delivered her first kid. So the fetus was a month along. At this point, she didn't necessarily know she was, like, hadn't taken a test. She had a feeling that she was.
Okay.
And then they confirmed, and that she was a month along, but was she a month along, or was the fetus a month along?
Drink from the stream.
Yeah. Jenny...
Just say what you mean, man.
Well, maybe they don't... you're trying to convey a message, like, think about, if you're translating something to English, it doesn't always sound... Anyway.
You're giving them a lot of credit. I don't know. I don't like them. I'm mad at them.
Denise expressed that she knew they could splice their DNA sequences with humans to make humans have certain desired traits of theirs. And then similarly, human DNA could be put into their DNA to be mixed and have like more human emotions, basically.
Okay.
So this isn't expressly said, but I get the impression that they're like, maybe if we just slowly mix us, people won't notice that they're not quite all human. I don't know. So there was a time when Jenny and Tom were visiting her in-laws with their baby son, Aiden. She found Tom and Aiden on the front lawn one night, met again by the familiar Greys. Tom handed Aiden to one of the Greys, and Jenny became distressed, obviously. She was unable to go with her son, and she started to cry. She heard or understood the message to say, do something to shut this one up. She was taken away from Tom to a room and examined. They stated they were attempting to fix a physiological problem, and her ovaries were burning like days later. Aiden was given back, and the next morning her mother-in-law was like, what the hell were you doing outside? She said she thought she heard Jenny crying. One night after Sarah was born and Tom was away again, Jenny went to go check on her, and when she approached Sarah's bassinet, she was violently thrown on her bed and flipped like face down. By the time she was conscious and moving again, 2 hours had passed, and she knew the figures had taken Sarah like they took Aiden. The next day, her neighbor confirmed that they saw something hovering near their house, and that there were people outside of it. Another time, this is so weird, Tom and Jenny were bathing Aiden when Jenny began to violently cough. A tiny object flew out of her nose, and Tom picked it up. And he said, you don't need that. And he flushed it down the toilet.
Did he investigate it? He was just like...
Jenny said she sometimes... Okay. Jenny said she sometimes wondered if Tom knew more or maybe was cooperating with them. She said 2 years later, he was killed in a car accident.
Oh, okay.
I don't think it had anything to do with them.
Yeah.
It just... like Denise was saying, she was compelled to, like, open the door.
Right.
So maybe
right.
were compelling him to be like, no, throw that away. It's nothing.
Oh, shit. That shouldn't have popped out. Get rid of that.
So Jenny and Kathleen continued to work together. This was written in 2014. So it's been 10 years. I don't know if they're still working together. But at the time, Jenny's uncovering of these memories has sort of helped her kind of get past them. She confirms that she also encountered an insectoid figure, so basically the examiner, who had taken a scoop of flesh from her during one visit. He conveyed to Jenny to let Kathleen know that a lot of speculation about them and their program were false. And then there was no elaboration about that.
As Kathleen, I'd be like, oh, no.
No, please don't notice me. Jenny has only ever been visited by Greys and the Insectoid guy, who seem to work together, so it seems like they're maybe not are the same species.
Yeah.
Other abductees that Kathleen has worked with have spoken of other entities, which is, it's going to make me sound so crazy, but reptilians who are not as kind, and they seem to be very concerned with human reproduction and reproducing with humans themselves. So it doesn't seem to me that they are like, let's do it via like syringe or needle. It seems to be a little more violent than that. Jenny concluded that she is grateful for the knowledge for, working with Kathleen, and continues to work through her fear. So I'll just tell you some similarities. Kathleen has worked with like hundreds of different supposed abductees, and she's noticed some similarities throughout. So most of them, she gave exact figures, but I'm gonna sit here and name a bunch of numbers that you probably are going to forget instantly. So most of them were female. They experienced multiple abductions throughout their life. Some had been taken over 10 times. They were taken at a young age, or were starting to be abducted at a young age. Most of them were not alone when they were taken. Some could remember at least part of their encounters. They would see a craft at least 1,000 feet from them most of the time. They saw entities before their abduction. They would witness UFOs before their abduction. They were examined by unknown entities. They had electronic malfunctions before like an abduction.
Okay.
They also had, which is interesting, paranormal activity within their house like after. So they would see like orbs, flying objects, flickering lights, missing objects that would reappear in like different spots later on. Like maybe they took something and then they tried to put it back. They received telepathic messages from entities. Some of them were given the gift of healing. I don't really know what that looks like, but they found themselves to be more sensitive and intuitive after abduction, but I also think that that's like trauma.
Yes.
Some of them said that they had psychic abilities. This one's weird. It says it did not experience high or low mood swings, which maybe they were just like numb after a while, numb for a time.
Yeah.
They said they had confusion and disorientation. A lot of them had insomnia, obviously unexplained marks, punctures, burns, gynecological problems. A lot of them, including Jenny, developed chronic fatigue syndrome. Although I think she's past that now. I think that now that she's done work with Kathleen, it's not resolved itself, but I think part of it's mental. I don't know. It seems to me that it's partly mental. They craved excessive amounts of salt, and they felt foreign implants in their body. And that's my story. How do you feel?
Okay. It sort of reminds me of the Devil Made Me Do It case.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to be again, I think we're such a fraction of the world that we know that I would never say I don't believe aliens exist. I certainly believe that somebody else is out there.
Right.
I have concerns about the stories that people tell because I think they can be symptoms of other things.
Yeah.
I think, like when you said they feel foreign objects in them, you know, I mean, how many, you know, a paranoid schizophrenic believes that somebody's implanted something in them. And so I just caution, I remain skeptical that, I mean, I guess why not? Why wouldn't they want to know about us, especially if they think that their own planet is failing or...
Right.
I don't know. I just...
Well, if it helps, I mean, I left out a lot of Kathleen's explanations where she's like, look, it could be this, it could be that. She tried really hard to remain neutral because if you really do care about the answer, you don't want it to be a false answer.
Yes.
She's compiled like similarities, especially between these two women. And I don't know for sure if Denise actually saw Jenny on that craft that day. I mean, who knows? I don't know.
Here's my other thing.
She did say that the brain, she was trying to word her questioning so that the brain wouldn't try to fill something in.
Yes.
Like if it didn't happen, she's like, don't make it up. If you don't know, just tell me.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
I find it interesting that beings who can control you subconsciously had to have a sit down with our president to agree to get the government to agree to let this happen. That's one of the things that I'm just like,
well, but wouldn't you go, because think about us, we've abducted other animals.
Yeah.
So if you were to go to like, if you were following like a group of primates, like a chimps or something, and you could sit down with like the head chimp and be like, don't try to like mess with us. Just don't be violent.
Right.
We can give you something in exchange, but we are going to take like some group members, not everybody, but can you sacrifice a few so that we can get what we want? And because they're not like killing people. I mean, not in this story anyway. It just seems like maybe we're the more intelligent, we're like the next one they know of,
right,
on a planet that they can exist on. And they're like, I don't know, maybe if we like assimilate ourselves. Then I was thinking like, okay, for me who doesn't have children, part of me is like, would it be so bad? This is just my opinion. It's not Kim's opinion. It's just mine. Would it be so bad if the human race were to sort of naturally die off? I mean, we have our time, right? But a lot of us will be like, no, we have to live forever. But to me, I'm like, you only have like 100 years, let's say. And who cares what happens after? Like every single species of everything has its time. And if it's, you know,
I know. But I think, so you and I do believe lack some biological naturally occurring in a lot of other people urge to procreate and have our biological go on.
I'm not that important to me. Like me especially.
Yeah, but you know what though? But that's weird, and it's interesting because you and I, in other ways, are very like our brain has like old timey, like prehistoric inclinations to be afraid of things that we don't need to be afraid of.
Yeah.
But we don't have. It's just think about. My dog right now, for example, is losing his mind because something in him is just telling him that he has to do this. And we just don't have it. We're like not.
But if you just think about like what, honestly, if you think about the Earth, what species, bacteria, but even there's different types of bacteria now. The bacteria that happened when the Earth was formed it's not the same as the stuff now.
No.
So things have their time. And I just feel like you're not going to know. Like, why is it so important for you? You're not even fully whatever you are. We just call them the Greys. But, like, you have to splice your DNA with humans, supposedly, if this story's all true. You're not even you anymore. You're like a hybrid something.
Oh, right. True.
That you're not even existing anymore. I mean, unfortunately, something, if this is true, happened to your planet, and it would make more sense for them to be like, no, we're just moving in. Like, I don't care what we look like.
Yeah, and that's kind of the other thing is, because other people are saying that there are other alien beings that they have encountered, different from the Greys and different from the Insectoid guy.
The Examiner.
You're like, well, what about them? Or do you not want to do that because they're not as emotionally intelligent as we are as well? I mean, it sounds like they're not.
That's what I mean, though. Like, I wonder if we're the next planet that they're like, oh, they seem to care about each other. Maybe they won't kill each other with nukes, except that's a real possibility. But, like, maybe they won't destroy their planet. Although they did say, or at least through Jenny's story, they said it was an invading race of something.
Yeah.
That they were protecting themselves and then kind of destroyed their planet in the process. I don't know. I guess I just don't feel it that we're that. We are important, but we have our time. Everybody has their time.
Yeah.
You can't live forever. Would you want to? I mean, not you specifically, but it's like, why is it so important for, okay, so you might care about your kids, right? Or maybe even your grandkids. If you've met them. Mm-hmm. But like 3, 4, 5 generations down the road, you don't even know that you don't know those people. You're not alive.
I mean, George Sewell probably wouldn't even like us.
That's that's exactly what I was thinking. Like, that guy doesn't give a crap about his thousands of descendants.
He's like, you work.
Yeah. You wear pants.
Sure, he's a lovely man.
Yeah.
Anyway, I know. But that's also logic getting in the way of it's just people's natural. I mean, it's an animal inclination to procreate and for your DNA to continue. I don't have it. I don't. No. And I do think, I think we know that naturally the Earth goes through
stages.
Yeah. And mass extinctions and all of that. But again, you're like, I don't know, maybe some people are like, maybe my great grandchild's going to be the scientist that like...
so arrogant, though.
Arrogant or hopeful? Listen.
But you don't know that for sure.
No, you don't. But how
and
would
humanity
it happen?
You don't even know if humanity is going to be around by that time. Maybe you only got to be like 3 other generations and then we all destroy each other.
I know. I mean, but are you willing to take a chance to say, I mean, obviously, yes, you are willing to say, oh, well, but
yes.
In general, the collective you willing to take the chance that that's going to be the case. No, I don't think so. And I don't think.
And if you have the means, like, it does seem like, it was interesting to me because they had said, oh, this is like new technology, which to me is like, oh, you've had this technology forever. But yeah, we have new technology. They must have new technology. And they have ways of just facilitating that, like creating, I don't know, and who knows how many projects are going on? You know what I mean? Like, it seems like they're abducting these women to create fetuses, or at least, which is so weird, but I don't know, maybe we're slowly becoming, it's like if we were to slowly become like a machine, if they can create like a heart that beats and you don't even have to like get it out of another person and you could just have a heart transplant and that's it, we would totally do it.
I mean, right. I think. I don't know. And it's interesting. So the topic that I'm going to talk about shortly, this just makes me think of that. Because you have to, Kathleen, I I'm sure she has ways of pulling certain people out and saying, you're not, I don't think that you're stable. I think that this doesn't really add up, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, she does say, like I said, I didn't really put it in, but she does go through, like, I want to visit your family. Have you been on TV? Have you been in the news? Like, you don't really want to...
Then a family member pulls her aside. Listen, you got to be careful. Don't feed into this alien thing, man.
Yeah.
I know. I don't know.
Well,
maybe I'm just angry because nobody picked me.
That's what I was thinking. Oh, that sounds so crazy because it's like you're being violated. This is a violation. If this actually happened,
my DNA's not good enough.
Right, that's when I was like, oh, well then.
No, they're like, that bitch doesn't want kids, so why are we going to spend our time?
Yeah, because then if you think about it, it's like, oh, you were already trying. We'll just make it seem like...
True, right. And especially, yeah, because the women said both of them had been having fertility issues. Mm-hmm. Well,
thanks for being a good sport. I was very nervous about talking to you.
No, again, I cannot not believe that there's something out there. But like you said, it's almost one of those things where you're like, but why? Why are you spending so much energy on one random person from New Hampshire? And but that's kind of what we said at the end of The Devil Made Me Do It too.
Right.
Like, why that little kid? What good was that going to do?
But why not that little
kid? Who knows? And if aliens and demons made any sense, then...
it was interesting because, like, all these paranormal things, I'm like, maybe it's aliens. It's not like a supernatural realm. It's like aliens, but...
Oh, see, I'd rather...
You'd rather demons?
I'd rather ghosts. Not demons.
Oh,
not demons. But a demon's not... A demon that's just moving stuff around your house. It's like, oh, cad.
They also were like, I mean, certain shadows or whatever, but I don't know.
No, don't fuck with shadows, people.
Well, thank you.
Of course. No, this was a different one. We haven't had...
I did try to choose a topic that was different, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, then. Good job.
You gonna do our outro?
I added in.
Okay.
I don't know the whole thing.
All right.
Thanks for listening to Relatively Weird. If you like what you hear, make sure to leave us a review and follow us on your podcast player of choice. You can also find us at Relatively Weird the Pod on Instagram. If you have any stories you'd like us to talk about, send us an email at relatively weirdthepod@gmail.com. See you next week.